and good evening. Welcome to Somerville and to our Skills Hub event, Exploring the Future of Food. Each year we organise an event around World Environment Day, tackling issues like water security, climate change, conservation and biodiversity. But this year, thanks to Tarka Abraham, a fourth year biochemist, we decided to focus on innovations in food production and thinking about the environmental impact of what we eat. So we have experts from a range of food tech companies, and we can promise you a tantalising glimpse into what might be on the dinner plates of the future. We're not expecting any fire alarms this evening, so if we do hear anything, please make your way calmly out through the side doors here, and the bathrooms are just through the door at the back. The talks and the panel discussion tonight should be wrapped up by about 7 o'clock, and then we invite you to networking with our CEOs and innovators from food, over a mainly vegan and vegetarian buffet, thanks to the Inspire grant from the University's Innovation Hub for providing financial support for this, and also Somerville College. So over to you, Talca, and thanks for bringing this together.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. I am really touched by how many people signed up. To be honest, when I saw there was this many people coming on the back of the Eventbrite link, I was completely terrified. There was a lot of marching around my room, reciting what on earth I was going to say. But then I remembered that this is just a great opportunity to talk about something that I really believe in. And I think that probably everyone here will agree with me that you and I aren't happy with the way that our food system currently works. None of us, or all of us, I say, are facing conflict with the values that we have around what we eat and our health. And yeah, the food system as it is, you and I agree that we don't want animals to be suffering. We don't want the world to be warmed by our actions. We don't want there to be so much food inequality in the world. We want people in the developing world to benefit from the foods that we get access to, which enrich every aspect of our lives. And when I first heard about some of the food technologies that we're going to be talking about today, I saw them as a bit of a silver bullet in the long-term future, fixing some of these problems. And what's really exciting is that this technology that we're going to be talking about today, cultivated meat, predominantly, it already exists. There's people out there now eating lab-grown burgers. So the real challenge is going to be scaling this technology up, which brings me to kind of reason I wanted to do this talk today, which was to bring a lot of you, smart, driven people, into one room to get a conversation going about how we're going to scale up this technology, because it can't have any of the positive impact that we want to have if we aren't scaling it up so that we can get all these animals out of factory farms and we can reduce the emissions of the food system. So today we're going to be hearing from 4 very inspiring speakers who I'm very grateful have come today about cultivated meat and their experience working within the industry. So we get a real exciting inside glimpse. And we're also going to be hearing from another company who's working on some futuristic food tech. Andy has founded his company doing some really cool stuff, making sustainable food ingredients by using otherwise wasted products. So it's going to be really exciting. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Riley to the stage. Riley is the head of brand and marketing at Ivy Farms, and even in her short career so far, she's had huge positive impact working in sustainable food companies. I found Riley really inspiring in our first meeting, and I'm sure there are some budding business ladies in the crowd here that are going to find Riley really inspiring too. Thank you. Welcome, Riley.
Oh man, what an intro. Thank you so much. Hi guys. I'm really excited to be here because like we were saying before, I've committed my career to alternative protein. I think when I went to study business at University of British Columbia over in Canada, I thought that I would go into running charities or something like that where I could make an impact, and I discovered alternative protein. It was the first time I ever felt like I could make a difference as a person. I felt inspired instead of kind of crushed by the weight of the climate disaster that we're experiencing today. So I'm excited to share that with you guys and a little bit more about what we're doing at Ivy Farm. Like Tarka was saying, we're located down in South Cali in the business park, and we do sustainable cultivated Wagyu, Angus, and Angus beef. Sorry. Okay, let's dive in. So I think I'm the only non-scientist that's speaking today, so I'll go into a little bit of what it looks like to be one of the only non-scientists at a startup. I do pretty much all of this. So depending on the phase of a company, you're going to be doing one or more of these things in bulk, and then they all kind of come together to create brand. But all of these things need to be considered as you're building a product, no matter if it exists in the market or if it doesn't yet, or it's just budding like we were saying before. This is pretty much what I do now. I'm happy to dive into any of this. But basically the most exciting thing about being at a startup right now is I am identifying who our consumers are. So when you're building a product, of course, the most important thing is, are people going to enjoy it? Who's going to enjoy it? And how do I reach out to them, connect with them, inspire them to try it? So we're looking at markets all over the world, and people have really different aversions to some of the aspects of meat. So some people have a higher level of trust in technology, whereas some people are like, absolutely not. I don't want anything near my meat. I want it to come cow to plate. So this has been really interesting, and I can dive into it more if anybody has questions on it. But in the interest of time, I will dive into this. So just really high level alternative proteins kind of as an umbrella. There are three major areas. So cultivated, of course, is actual meat from animals, genetically identical. Plant-based, that's your pea, your soy, your wheat, a lot of incredible things happening here. And then precision fermentation, which is basically training microbes to produce the kinds of proteins or chemicals that you want. So this space is incredibly interesting, and if any of you guys want to talk about it afterward, I could go all day. So there's so much in here to dive into, but the point of all of this is really to address this issue. So everybody mostly loves eating meat. It's a human thing. We just love it. We also should probably love the planet because we need it for obvious reasons. The issue with that is it's the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas. So that's more than all of transportation combined. Pretty major issue. And each of us as an individual has the opportunity to change that with our diet. So farming. Oh, what a wonderful gift that keeps on giving. At the factory farming level, it's never been more efficient, right? There are innovations happening, and we've never had bigger chickens that grow faster ever before. The issue is it's not quite impactful enough, not enough innovation to make it efficient. So these calorie conversion ratios, you're not going to see that in very many other industries. So that's basically like inputs to outputs. You're putting 25 calories into a cow on average to get one out to a human. So I think we can do a little better than that. Some of the other options, we can all go vegan, vegetarian. There's some wonderful people working on that. It's a little bit slow with the challenge. So we're working on something else, and our calorie conversion right now is 3-to-1, and hopefully dropping. So some of the things that we pride ourselves on: huge reductions in land use, greenhouse gas emissions, and water, all very important, especially fresh water. I think here and in British Columbia, where I'm from, we don't really see the need for fresh water preservation, but I've lived in California, and let me tell you, it is in drought all the time. There are no green hills like the photos. It's very brown. And I think one of the exciting things about kind of the next evolution of meat, I like to call it, is we get to do a little bit more with the nutritionals. So where beef doesn't typically have large levels of omega-3 and omega-6, our product will. Antibiotics, don't need to use them in our process, so we're talking about antibiotic resistance. We're trying to mitigate that where we can. And I think one of the most exciting things, I don't know if any of you are into food waste, I hope you are, but we won't have nearly as much food waste, one, because we won't be exposed to contamination. So if you think about when you slaughter a cow, there's all sorts of things that can get in there and cause wasted product. We won't have that, and we'll have a very long shelf life because we don't have those contamination risks. So that'll be huge and really great for sustainability. Okay, so For those of you who have never heard of cultivated meat, which I would guess is 95% of you, basically what we do, very high level, and I'm sure the other guys will go into more detail maybe, hopefully. But basically, when you're thinking about growing an entire cow, there's a lot that goes into it, right? You have to grow the hooves, the eyelashes, the ears, all the things. And then it goes through this process of the food system, right? And some cows have it better than others, but let's assume we're at a factory farm in Brazil where they're cutting down the Amazon and doing all those great things that are super helpful to everyone. You will have this huge, long process and then have to slaughter it and then put it into the food system. And what we're trying to do is mitigate the actual raising of the animal and just focus on growing the parts of the animal that we want, which is the muscle and fat predominantly. So our process will take 3 to 4 weeks, hopefully down to 2, and then we'll get pure muscle and pure fat and send it into the food system. And that's the basic overview. And the way that we get these cells is we have a partner up in Northern Ireland called Finnebrogue, and we selected a Wagyu cow and an Angus cow, took a sample from that cow, brought it back to our labs down here, and edited those cells so that they'd be able to survive in a new environment and grow faster and need less nutrients. And then we put them into this process and they grow into the meat that we want. Great. And this is what the meat looks like. This is why I'm excited, because all that stuff I don't get to go into the lab. So this is what I get to see at the end. And we're working with really incredible culinary contacts and major food companies all over the country and all over the world that are really excited to put this into their future planning for innovation. There aren't very many robust plans for net zero goals in retail, like grocery stores, for example. So products like this let them have a little bit more of a chance to meet those goals, which is great. We love enabling that. Some other companies around the world that are doing this with success. One of my favorites is Vow. They just came up with a martini at a futuristic, I think, tapas bar in Singapore, and they called it "A Quail Walks Into a Bar." I think that's hilarious. It's a quail martini. Anyway, super nerd. And then you have companies like Aleph, they're doing steak, and then Upside Foods and Good Meat are kind of some of the OG companies that have been doing this for a really long time. A lot of companies are doing avian cells, some are doing mammalian, and then one company just got approval in the US to do salmon. So that's really exciting because that's the first fish in the world or seafood in the world. I haven't tried it, I'm dying to. Okay, so I had one more slide in here, but I think it's not going. So we'll just leave it there. But please ask me any questions about what it means to sell this product in, and about my background. I came up through the plant-based space. I've worked for companies like Beyond and Impossible Foods. Yeah, I'm happy to chat with any of you guys about what you want to do with your careers and connect you with anybody in my network.
Thank you so much, Riley. That was absolutely fantastic. Next, we're going to hear from Martin. Martin has done, he's a very experienced postdoctoral researcher before he joined at Hoxton. And Hoxton Farms is a company that is making cultivated fat for pork, which I think is really exciting, especially as a first step into scaling up this product.
Do I click on this or do it? Should I? Maybe? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for the introduction, Tarka. So my name is Martin Carvalho Pacheco. I'm a scientist at Hoxton Farms. I lead a team in what's called media development, which I will explain a little bit of what that means. And as Tarka said, we work in cultivated fat, particularly in cultivated pork. And the idea of what we do is we try to create fat, not necessarily as a product that we will sell to the consumers, because most people will not buy fat as such, but it's what's called a B2B, so business to business product that you will sell it to some other company, and that company will make most likely a hybrid product where it's a mixture between a cultivated fat and either a vegetable protein, most likely say something like a soy protein or any other vegetable protein. The point here is that, and there's been studies that show that the vast majority of flavor comes from fat in our food, and particularly in our meat. So you can do things like where you grab pork fat and then you, like real pork fat, and then you mix it with well, also this is also real pork fat, but traditional pork fat, and then you mix it with a vegetable protein, and it tastes very similar to how the original, say, pork sausage would taste. And then you can do things like this. So this is a typical example of something that you can build where this is a pork belly, which has cultivated fat. The cultivated fat is the white part, which is how most pork belly looks like. And in this case, the protein is a vegetable protein. But you can do other products, things like meatballs, which are also, in this case, a mixture of pork fat with actual lean meat. And then you can also, there's fat that doesn't necessarily go into this sort of like more complex products, but also there's fat in things like soup, which can also be done with cultivated fat. So Hoxton Farms it's a company which is actually in London. We are quite close to like Bank. If you see those buildings at the end, that's the Bank region of London. So we're in the center of London, and that's actually our floor. And in there we have a whole R&D lab, but also a small pilot plant production of up to 1,000 liters per year. And how does the process work? This is the basics of how cultivated fat and cultivated meat in general works is quite similar, I think, in most cases. And it's something similar to what Riley mentioned. You grab start in this case from immortalized stem cells that come from pigs, and then you grow them in bioreactors from very small scales to much larger scales. One important thing from a scientific point of view is that we then have to make those cells differentiate into adipocytes, into fat, and what comes out of this is something looks like that, which is a white thing that looks like fat. And then you can mix it with a vegetable protein and make some of those products that I mentioned. Couple of things I wanted to mention from a sort of like scientific point of view, and I'm happy to discuss this at length during questions, or we can talk later. Some of the sort of like scientific challenges and places where like different fields of science play a role. An interesting thing is that a lot of these cultivated meat companies, they will use some things like genome engineering to like find cells that would both proliferate but also differentiate into whichever product we want to make. We use a lot of machine learning and like different computational models, from things like using bioinformatic tools to select which kind of like locuses you want to concentrate for your genome engineering, from things like using algorithms to develop the medias or to optimize the medias, which are the things that you feed the cells so that the cells can proliferate and then they can differentiate. And of course, making those medias cheap, because a huge problem or challenge with cultivated meat in general is that it's very expensive. From computer vision models to like see how the experiments are going, to things like computational fluid dynamics that can be used to design more efficient reactors. There's a lot of aspects where like a lot of like machine learning, maybe more traditional mathematical modeling can like feed into what we do. Another aspect that is kind of interesting about the work that we do is we use an ultra-scaled reactor to make our product as cheaply as possible. So at the end of this process, where this is where this third step, this is where we stop usually. What ends up coming out is something that looks like this. For those who are not used to looking at microscopy images, the blue things there are nuclei from the cells, and the green thing is the lipid droplets. So that's how a lipid or adipocyte cell from a pork looks like in a more of a, I think, easier image to see. If you then attach this into a screen, because a plate, because this is relatively hard to see through with a microscope, it looks something like this. And again, here all of these like big droplets these are lipid droplets. The nuclei are not as easy to see in an image like this, but that's why you can do things like design algorithms to measure these kind of things to see how well your process works. And hopefully this works. So if you then produce this process, you go through all of this process and you cook this. On the right, we have a traditional pork fat, and on the left, we have a Hoxton Farms fat. And it looks and cooks and smells just like normal pork fat. And I think that's all I have. Yes, that's my email. If anybody wants to contact me, anything, or discuss anything, feel free to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I am desperate to know whether it makes good crackling, I have to say. So, next up, we're going to hear from Ahmed. He has had a really, really cool career, I think, with a lot of positive impact so far, which I was really impressed with, including working on the COVID vaccine. So we've all got a lot of, thanks to give, I think, on that. And yeah, today he's going to be talking about his role at Multus Media, which is a company that makes the food for food, as they put it, which is really about creating the media that the cells that used for cultivated meat need to grow and proliferate into loads of food. And what's really cool about Multus Media is they've worked really hard to make sure that there's no animal products going into this media that's needed to support the cells. So Ahmed can tell us much more. And please welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Cheers. Okay. So one of the concepts, or one of the good things that cultivated meat can do, is it can introduce food security where food security doesn't necessarily exist. And I had the experience of experiencing that in some way. So I did my last 2 years of high school in Qatar, which is a peninsula in the Middle East. It's pretty small, arid, and it's a net importer of everything aside from natural gas. So in the year 2017, a lot of the neighboring countries around Qatar decided to impose a trade embargo, which meant for us that overnight we saw a big hit to all the meat, all the dairy, all the eggs, all the bread. Most of the staple foods that you'd find in your supermarkets were just kind of like more or less gone. In the coming weeks, Qatar would strike deals with neighboring countries to bring those foods back. And then in the coming years, it would build this national food program to ensure it doesn't happen again. I would love to say it was at that point that I was like, oh yeah, food security, and I found cultivated meat, and I kind of geared my career towards that. I didn't do that. I was 17. I moved to Sheffield, where I did my bachelor's in bioengineering. The dogma of bioengineering is bioprocessing, which is what I focused on, is this here. So it's more or less how do we combine different unit operations, and how do we get the living systems in those unit operations to produce the things that we want. And the rigmarole there is mostly biopharma. That's most of what I was fed. I did one module in biorefineries, which kind of took this and applied it to side streams and generate value-added goods. So stuff like bioplastics or biofuels, the chemicals that you see in your facial creams. So I was really interested in that. That was like a pretty cool spin in my mind. And so I applied to a lot of companies working in that space. I was like, I really want to do this. So I applied to people like Olico or Biobase Europe. What have you, the year was 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. The economy took a nosedive because of something called COVID. So I ended up finishing my degree in the comfort of my bedroom in Edinburgh, where my family live. I was kind of there a bit bummed out, like, oh, I really want to do something with my life, but I'm here and blah, 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 blah. So I worked in a COVID lab for a bit, and there I kind of processed swab tests day and night, running them through different liquid handlers and thermocyclers, and then I moved on from there to here in Oxford, where we made the AstraZeneca vaccine batch by batch, day and night. It was at that point where I was stood in these onesies that you see here, kind of like staring at a reactor with the cells swirling around. And my colleague walks over to me and he's like, isn't it weird that there's these people using like these kind of bioreactors to make meat? And at that point, that was my first intro to it. I just turned around and was like, Jakob, what the hell are you on about? Sorry. And he explains to me the concept of cultivated meat. I go home, I do some research, I see this company in the US that's opening their demonstration facility. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. This is like biorefineries 2.0. So I really connect with that, and then the food security element, and I'm like, all right, this is kind of what I want to do. I gear my career towards that in a way. So I round off my education in chemical engineering in London. I'm doing that full-time. I'm working in Oxford full-time. And I leave Oxford to finish my dissertation, which is that thing there. It was controlling protein expression using temperature. Is very cool. Just side note. And so there I am again, starting my career again, and I have this experience working with bioreactors, working in the lab, and this biochemical training. And I think I can take this anywhere, right? And so I did. I moved to Austria to a engineering services company that catered specifically to cultivated meat and cell ag. And it was there that I got to talk to all these different customers working in the space, receive all this training, work in a project in the Middle East, and it was really cool. But what it amounted to was me kind of on a computer in an office in Austria, talking to people doing the innovation, when what I really wanted was to do it myself. And so I moved on from that, and I've now been at Multus for almost 2 years. And at Multus, we pulled out on one of the 3 levers to help make this industry scale. So you've already heard a primer from Riley and Martin on what these levers are, but I'll just say it again in my own words. One is the cells. You need your cells to be robust and amenable to change and grow beautifully and become fat or muscle beautifully. The second lever is your bioreactor and your process. You're borrowing kind of concepts here from biopharma and the brewing industry. We can't sit anywhere in the middle when it comes to efficiency or cost. We need to be all the way over. And then the final lever, which is the lever that we pull down at Multus, is the media. So similar to how me, you, and everything need to eat to live and grow, so do the cells. You've taken them out of the context of their body. So you need to give them kind of a readily accessible form of vitamins, minerals, proteins, and some signaling molecules to convince it that it's still in a body. And the problem with media today is there's already media out there that you can use to make your cells grow in beautiful numbers. But if you think of the end goal of what we want products in the Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, in the shelves, wherever you do your shop. The media today is at such a cost that it doesn't allow you to get there. And so that's the reason why me and everyone you've heard from today probably innovate on media in some way. The problem with media development is it's very time consuming and it's very difficult. So these cells, think of them as like fussy wine connoisseurs, right? Some of them like a red wine, some of them like a white, like a very specific one. Others are like fine with rosé, but they don't necessarily like it. Cells are somewhat similar. They have like very special requirements. And those wines or those formulations are, I guess, mixtures of 30 ingredients combined in a very specific way. And if you think of those different ingredients as like cards and you shuffle them about, you can make as many combinations as like maybe sand in the desert or something. And so that's why it's a big problem. It's this huge design space. It takes loads of time. And it's very difficult to make so many different medias and test them. So at Multus, we kind of have this approach where we combine lab automation, AI-led decision making, and some computer vision to help us crash that timeline from, say, a project that would take 2-ish years to maybe 6 months. So how that works is, say you're any customer X, you've extracted this cell line from a cow in New Zealand, and you're like, please make it grow. You give us those cells, we kind of characterize them, which is essentially just making sure that they do what you say they can do. And then we create an ingredient list, and then we feed it to the God, which is the AI model. And then the AI model says, hey, test these formulations. We put it into the lab where the automation systems prepare so many different formulations and then culture them. And then we get images of the cells growing on those medias. And from that, we get an idea of how healthy they are and how quick they're growing. And we get this big biological data set that we feed to the God. And then the God's like, okay, I've done exploring. I think you should test this area. And then after that, we go again, and it says, I think you should explore that area. And that's kind of the image in the far corner over there. So the red is maybe the first iteration, the yellow is the second, and the green is the third, and it's narrowing in on this target region where the customer said, I want it to grow like this, I want it to cost like this, and I want my sales to be this healthy. So yeah, that is the concept. This is just a slide showing that it's an iterative process. I probably should have skipped to this to show you that it does this again and again. And we probably arrive at the results we need by like the third iteration. So yeah, that is what Multus does. I'm an engineer at Multus, or a bioprocessing engineer. What that means really depends on the phase, so similar to what Riley said earlier. Okay. We don't only do custom development, we do off-the-shelf formulations and food safe supply. So we make media for customers that already have their media, and we have off-the-shelf products that we sell. Anyways, so what I do really depends on the phase at which the company's at. So when I first started, I focused on production and engineering. This is just to give you an idea of what you can do at a cultivated meat company. So we had a facility, and I was kind of responsible for fitting that out alongside with like one other person. We built a quality management system, which means interacting with the infrastructure that already exists for food and telling them, hey, we've built this facility, we've built these processes, I promise you it's safe. And they say, yeah, sure, here's your certificate. It's not that simple, it takes a lot of work, and I'm very proud of this certificate. And then we also scaled up our production with customers, so that involved kind of talking to engineering services companies and telling them, I need this, 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 and then they give us these designs, and I say, make it better, make it better, make it better. And then I scale it up with customers. That was very fun. That was one phase. And then other things I do is other engineering and science. So I get to run experiments in the lab. I get to build tools for people to use. Most recently, I've been developing this food-grade version of DMEM F12, which is kind of a staple of growth media for most cell culture applications out there. And a food-grade version doesn't exist, and you can imagine why a food-grade version would be important if we're trying to sell food products. And another thing I'm working on is designing a high-throughput system for suspension cells. So similar to what you've seen earlier, I'm kind of running experiments and building and buying things and fitting them in, and it's very cool. And I wouldn't have had that impact in a corporate, so very happy to do that. This is just some data I collected. This is an imaging model that I made, and this is like an application that I made that stops and starts a device at regular intervals, which makes science very easy. Yeah, cool. So I'm nothing without a team. Like if I didn't have a team, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. And we're a team of 20 scientists, engineers, operators. We come from all around the world. And this comes like to my last 2 points. I think for a career, as much as you'd want to focus on a specific area, I think it's very important to find the right environment. And things like values are very good for kind of understanding what environment you'd want to be in. So that's number one. And then the last point is to talk about the fourth lever, which I didn't mention, which is people. So there's the cells, there's the media, there's the bioreactors, but the most important one is people, right? We need people to believe, we need people to want to contribute, and then we also, we need people to believe, we need people to want to contribute. There's a third thing that's not really coming together in my mind. Okay, that's fine. So without people believing, we aren't able to raise the investment that we need to bring these products to the market. Without people who want, we don't have a case for these products being on the shelves. And then finally, without people like you believing that we can create this good that we say we can do, then we're not able to scale our operations in any way that is meaningful. And so I hope from this talk and the other talks today, you've kind of gathered an idea that this is an industry that needs help, and you can make an impact, and there's so many ways in which you can make an impact. I'll be happy to talk with any of you today. That's really all I've had to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really fun and really inspiring. So, we are going to hear a bit more about the science now from Lewis, who is doing his PhD studying how we can use plant-based scaffolds to get cells that will be used in cultivated meat to grow on them. And Lewis has been doing his research project on that, and I think it's really cool that he's gone and found a research project on the academic side of things because that's also what we need to drive this innovation. So please welcome Lewis to the stage.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm, as Tarka sort of explained, I'm Louis. I'm a PhD researcher at Aston in my second year. My project is in partnership with the LGC group and as part of the Lifetime CDT. And my research works on developing an edible scaffold that we can use for the growth of mesenchymal stem cells, adipose-derived bovine cells, essentially, and 3D print them. So, a bit of background on me first. I'm not a food scientist by trade or anything like that. I have a degree in biomedical material science from the University of Birmingham, and sort of during my undergraduate, I found a real interest in the multidisciplinary aspect of sort of tissue engineering, and using my undergraduate sort of final product on bioprinting, I managed to apply for a project in cultivated meat. I sort of didn't know anything about it, and I saw it and I thought it was kind of interesting, and so I applied for it. So I think everyone's touched on the established livestock farming is not really fit for purpose currently. Riley's got had nicer statistics than I had, or the same ones. But cultivated meat basically is adapting tissue engineering principles for growing meat in a renewable system. I think it's particularly appealing to me because I've tried going vegan and vegetarian a couple of times and failed miserably. So if we could get something that tastes a bit more like what I would like, then we're in for a win. Naturally, the rationale, of course, is to reduce the global warming impact, as well as, I think, quite interestingly and vitally, fight antibiotic resistance by better controlling our feedstocks, as well as make the market less susceptible to global headwinds and climate-related events, which are going to become more apparent. The obstacles with cultivated meat naturally are cell culture related in part, which the lovely people who went ahead of me explained quite well, as well as things like public acceptance and the lack of appropriate materials, the last point of which is what my research is really focused on. So I first scouted sustainable and edible materials, and I'm now in the process of assessing cell adherence and activity to these materials, as well as characterizing the mechanical properties and the functional groups that we can use to better tune the material for cultivated meat. And then I'm going to hopefully move to printing and bioprinting a final scaffold that could be used for differentiation and producing a structured product, which, and by that I sort of mean, in an ideal world, what I do is I take algae, plant-based materials, herbs, plant seeds, pull out the nice polysaccharides and other structural materials, as well as some proteins, make a nice hydrogel that we can then extrude and 3D print and seed some stem cells onto, which we get a nice scaffold for, and then through some complicated work, essentially differentiate these cells into either fat or muscle tissue for a scalable, in theory, platform that we can use to create a structured product like a steak, as opposed to the more mince-like products which are produced if we just use sort of a bioreactor system. The advantage of doing it this way is that we get to use hydrogels for cell scaffolds. So cells, as Ahmed sort of touched on, they're quite picky. They don't like just growing on plastic. So if we could better recapitulate the environment in which they normally grow, the extracellular matrix, we can essentially help the cells behave more appropriately. The extracellular matrix is a complex system, and by using hydrogels, hopefully, we'd better recreate some of these biophysical cues that help dictate cell behavior, as well as enhance the sensory properties of the final product. As well as this, I plan to do some 3D printing. I've done a bit. So similar to normal 3D printing, we just make the design in CAD, feed it into the printer, and then using machinery, essentially we extrude a soft material instead of normal plastic, and build out a three-dimensional structure layer by layer. And this layer by layer technique allows us to build out a scaffold with anisotrophic features, similar to real meat, where you've got muscle and fat interwoven between each other, as well as potentially I plan to try and interweave some electrospun fibers to better recreate that extracellular matrix that we see. So currently, I do a bit of 3D printing. I've proved that it can be extruded. I print these grids to try and optimize the printability of the material, optimize the mechanical behavior, and then hopefully scale up to more complicated structures. So these are some products that I made for a different project using slightly nicer materials that were animal based, unfortunately. And so we were able to get some nice Y-shaped channels that you could feed water through. So I hope to sort of adapt these techniques to my final product, my final material. So a bit of the materials that I'm looking at, I don't know what that black box is. Doesn't matter. So I'm looking at algae-based materials, dietary fibers such as arabinoxylan and pectin, as well as some plant gums. Okay, that's what that is. So this is some flaxseed gum, which I'm using as a source of arabinoxylan, so it looks nice and jiggly. Yeah, yum. But the issue with these materials is that basically if you throw cells at them, there's nothing on the material that the cells can recognize effectively, and so they essentially just ball up and are in a stasis, essentially. So what I'm looking at now is blending with more functional products such as prolamins, so zein from corn, plant proteins from pumpkin seed and pea protein, as well as some soy, as well as some other materials, so mushroom-based chitosan and some Cap1 peptides, which are essentially bacterially produced extracellular matrix proteins. If we sort of plot the critical criteria, the important criteria that we use, we can sort of see the materials, none of them are really perfect, which is why the blending is so important. So I'm hoping to feed in the less mechanically functional but cell functional materials in with the more mechanically reliant materials such as alginate or gelan. And then finally, I hope that this work has all been interesting, at least in some way. And if it is, there's never been a better time to really get into the industry, even through academia. I co-founded the Alt Protein project at Aston, which is a fund that GFI set up. So we're funded by GFI to do lots of different outreach and awareness schemes. So we have lots of career development opportunities within industry, as well as in academia, as well as networking events. So we were invited to the Bezos Center for Sustainable Proteins kickoff event earlier this year, as well as we're allowed to go on tours of facilities and startups, and GFI gives us the funds to travel there, basically. So this is us at Hoxton Farms. I think Martin is in that image. Yeah, just can see him. Yeah, as well as we visited Meatly earlier this year, just after they had their successful product launch. And what's really interesting about that one was that we built out a national network of chapters, of all protein chapters. So we went with all of the UK chapters that are currently active. There is one at Oxford that has been dormant for a couple of years, I believe. So if you're interested, please do reach out and I can send you the information for getting that reinvigorated. We've got a social media and stuff like that. But great. I'd like to thank my supervisors as well as some collaborators at the University of Birmingham, as well as Julian at the National Measurement Laboratory and all of the students at the Lifetime CDT. Thank you.